to the statements of the Kremlin's official representatives. I understand, yes, it's possible here. And there is, let's say, a scheme for how to treat the statements of such people. Naturally, I will not voice it on the Freedom TV channel, but nevertheless, Dmitry Peskov, Putin's talking Rob, said that the Kremlin was allegedly ready to return to the Istanbul negotiations, with Ukraine. In the Istanbul format. Then you also participated as part of the Ukrainian delegation at the Dolmabahce Palace in Istanbul. After 2 years of full-scale aggression, more than 2 years, is Ukraine ready to return to exactly this format of negotiations with the Russian side? Once again, look, negotiations are negotiations. There are two sides that basically hear each other. The Russian Federation does not offer any negotiations, it offers capitulative conditions. Look, you are giving us your territory. You are saying that we did not kill people here, that we did not lose the war, that we did not commit war crimes, that we are not responsible for the destruction that we brought to you. We want to mock you later, we want to accumulate resources and finish you off. Because we believe, and officially speak about it through the mouth of this subject, again with the disgusting surname Peskov, just like the disgusting surname Putin, and so on. We say that we want to destroy Ukraine as a concept, the Ukrainian state as a concept, the Ukrainian identity as a concept, to finish off some of your people and so on. If you accept all this, then we are ready to agree with you that within 5 years, you will cease to exist. To be honest, I don't quite understand where the word negotiations is here. There is no word negotiation here. They, as at the beginning of the war, entering the entire territory of Ukraine, offered to surrender, lay down their arms, kneel down, and say you are gods. In the same way, they are now offering it. They propose to say that all that exists is Russia, and Ukraine as such does not exist. There is no concept of a negotiation room, there are no options to negotiate here. In this type of war, usually someone has to lose. Mandatory? It is important for democracy that not only for Ukraine, it is important for democracy that Russia loses. Why? Because Russia is not talking about the territory of Ukraine and not only wants to bring Ukraine to its knees. Russia says that there should be no international law, no bilateral agreements, no security guarantees, no military alliances. That will not take into account the interests of the Russian Federation. And in general, Russia believes that Europe should kneel before the Russian Federation and so on. Therefore, I do not see any possibility at all to negotiate with subjects named Putin. I do not know there. Patrushev, Lavrov, Peskov, and so on are there. In other words, it is deliberately dooming yourself to death. Any agreements with people who are ready to fight, and the Russian Federation is ready to live only in a state of war. There are no other formats of life for them. They will not be able to control the internal space if they do not offer war against anyone and so on. This means dooming Ukraine to death. But I honestly don't quite understand why, if it's so obvious, why pretend that we don't understand it and are ready to play this game. Then there are no possibilities about something here. Look at this physiognomy, look at his argumentation, at his hatred of Ukraine. And in general, listen to what the Russian Federation is finally saying at different levels, official and unofficial. Not only propaganda speaks, not only for the domestic market. They genuinely hate you. They want to kill you. Do you want to negotiate with someone who wants to kill you? Well, in any case, if not today, then tomorrow, as soon as you turn away, as soon as you fall asleep, he will want to shove a knife in your back. But I don't see the need to discuss here what is psychologically obvious. This very thesis can be reduced to one phrase, you know. What official Kiev, as a whole, conveys to all other capitals, Russia will not be able to win, and should not win. I remind our viewers that 2 years ago, 1852, a new object of underwater cultural heritage appeared in Ukraine. Its number 2064, the cruiser Moscow. Then, the Ukrainian Defense Forces were able to prove to the whole world that the state is not a maritime state in fact. De jure, let's say, de facto maritime in terms of military potential is not quite. It can hurt, let's say, the Russian occupiers. In the context of the upcoming peace summit in Switzerland, which was also discussed a lot this week, This phrase, Russia will not be able to win, how is it, in fact, discussed with our allies, and with those countries that will join the formula of peace as a whole? Does everyone understand this? Does everyone believe in it, let's say? There is a more important thesis here. Today, we have a so-called artificial shortage of weapons. Yes, this thesis is important because look, everything is clear with Russia, how it fights, how much, and so on. You just said about the cruiser Moscow, and then there were quite a lot of such events that clearly show what Ukraine is capable of, how it knows how to fight, and so on and so forth. We have a problem with you today, called an artificial shortage of a parity number of weapons. This is what causes strange sensations. Not a Formula 4 piece, because Mr. Zelensky's Formula 4 piece is very clearly spelled out. Look, the world should be fair for everyone. And a just world can be built on specific parameters. International law must prevail. Within the framework of international law, it is clearly clear that the sovereign territory of Ukraine should be guaranteed to relate only to the jurisdiction of Ukraine. Accordingly, Russia must leave this territory in full. And now we come back to the key thesis. Artificial, I emphasize the word artificial shortage of weapons. Because what Russia is doing is clear, the number of weapons Russia has is clear, the number of weapons Ukraine has is not clear. Because, in principle, this is mathematically impossible when the GDP of European countries, the total GDP of 27 times exceeds the GDP of the Russian Federation. And then it is not clear why there is such a shortage of weapons, why there is not enough of them on the battlefield, why, in principle, Ukraine is fighting based on deficits and not having relative parity with the Russian army. Having already proved what you said about the cruiser Moscow, proving that she knows how to fight. Having proved that other countries besides Ukraine are unlikely to be able to destroy the Russian army so effectively. And it is unlikely that Europe will receive its 50-year guarantee for the future, guaranteed for its values, if Russia does not lose. It's all obvious. And so, of course, there is a Formula 4 piece. Of course, it is clear. Of course, it is based on the key word that everyone has forgotten today, justice, which means that Russia must lose. This is an absolute direct connection. And of course, all this rests on one thing, the artificial shortage of weapons in Ukraine. Now, if we remove the word artificial and solve the problem with the shortage of weapons, then of course the Formula 4 piece will receive proper support on the battlefield, and after that it will be, let's say, implemented. Not only in the negotiation process with our partners, but also implemented from the point of view of countries. For example, neutral countries, for example, the Global South, who will see the power of democracies that are able to collectively defend their partner. At the end, Mikhail, and quoting with the President of Ukraine from an interview with Bild, "This is a long way to liberate the territory of Ukraine. It's a long way to go. I'm not saying that we will liberate the entire territory with weapons." Such a phrase appeared. If we want to preserve the independence of Ukraine, a democratic Ukraine as part of Europe, as a future member of the EU, as a nation, if we want to preserve this, we need to regain our independence. This means that there is no frozen conflict within the framework of the Swiss Peace Summit. Of course, this summit is called a crash test of the Ukrainian Formula 4 peace. Here is the first aspect. How is this option of liberation without weapons considered, if I understand correctly? Is there diplomatic pressure on the Russian Federation here? How? Look, the president is absolutely, in my opinion, perfectly right. Look, he says what I say all the time. Look, the Russian Federation is an ear on clay feet. This is obvious, several significant tactical defeats along the front line, and for this it is necessary again to saturate Ukraine with good quantities of weapons. Yes, the one that is needed at this stage of the war. It will lead to the collapse of the front line, to the flight of Russian, let's say, mobilizers to the territory of Russia. Then irreversible processes will begin in Russia. Riots, conflicts, shootings, and so on and so forth will begin. We have already seen repeatedly, both after the terrorist attack in Crocus and after, let's say, the unsuccessful coup of the Wagnerians in the Russian Federation, that there is no power vertical there. As soon as the mobilizers run there, as soon as it becomes clear that the war is no longer going in a winning way for Russia, yes, well, that is, that they are clearly losing it, after that irreversible processes will begin in Russia. Putin will disappear, we won't even see him. Where is he? What is he? Not only Putin, many personalities in his entourage will disappear, and so on. It turns out that there is no vertical force. The president is absolutely right. There is no need to achieve everything with weapons in your hands. It will be necessary, relatively speaking, to inflict several significant, pronounced tactical defeats. After that, I emphasize once again, irreversible processes will begin in Russia itself. And then Ukraine will receive its territories in full. This is also obvious. This is the logic of war. It is absolutely clear, and so on. To do this, you need to fulfill several conditions. Weapons, a clear principled position regarding Russia. The same sanctions, we need to examine them, because it looks, I emphasize again, ridiculous. Sanctions seem to exist, and they don't seem to exist, because they allow Russia to earn money, and so on and so forth. And accordingly, as soon as this begins, as soon as there is a parity number of weapons of Ukraine, and as soon as Russia's landslide defeat begins along the front line, but then we will see a completely different picture along the front line. Then we will talk about the fact that there is no need to really liberate, because there will be heavy fighting everywhere. No. The fights will be of a different type already going on. And, accordingly, the president is absolutely right in this regard. Another issue that we have already talked about quite often and repeatedly on the air is the issue of the parity number of weapons for Ukraine.
Yes, Mikhail, thank you very much. It's a difficult week ahead for Ukraine, and it's true. Therefore, we will definitely see you and see how it goes, what important decisions will be made for Ukraine, and how our allies will act. Mikhail Podolyak, advisor to the head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, was in touch with us. We are dear friends. After a short pause, we will come back and continue.